Okay, here's our review video for our first week. What I'm going to do real quickly is just give you a chance to check over your answers. So that's what maybe the first 30 seconds or so of this video will be. And then I'm going to specifically work and talk about some of these problems. All right, so for your test tomorrow, one of the things you may want to do, just so you can keep your rules straight, is go through and do all of the addition and subtraction problems first, and then maybe go through and do any multiplication division. So remember, any problem that is addition and subtraction, here let me highlight a little bit better. Any of these addition and subtraction problems, we're thinking about good guys and bad guys. That's kind of the trick that we had there. So that's what you're thinking about on those. And then on these other multiplication division problems, we either have the triangle or the little tic-tac-toe board. Either way, to remember sign rules there. The only other thing I want to point out to you, remember if you have a double negative sign, for example, in question 1 here, double negative changes to a positive. So that's why this is really 5 plus 13. A similar thing is going to happen here on question number 8. All right, on the bottom, another thing you may want to do, kind of along those same lines, is maybe you want to go through and do all of the expressions first, so that you remember on those you're not solving. So on expressions, we don't solve and we don't do opposites. So you're literally just getting rid of any parentheses and adding any like terms together. So on 13, for instance, here I've done I've added the two r's together to get 2r, and then combine the -8 and the -7 to get -15. On 14, I distributed. Remember that negative times a negative is going to give you a positive. So this is -9 that's distributing, so I get a positive for both of those. On question 16, so also an expression, question 16 right here, I distribute two things. First, I distribute the 2, and then I distributed the -10. It's kind of hard to read my answer here, and I don't know if I was making a mistake or not. I very well could have been. This should actually be positive 74, because that's positive 80 and -60 when you combine. So remember, I'm not doing any opposites. I'm just distributing to get rid of any parentheses and then adding common terms together. All right. Question 15 is an example of an equation, and it's one that sometimes you all aren't as comfortable with in the beginning because it's got a fraction in it. So remember, we want to multiply by the biggest denominator we see. In this problem, we only have one denominator, that's 3. We need to multiply by every single thing. So I'm going to multiply by the b, by the fraction, by the -2b, and by the 3. I hope that you see that those are 4 separate terms altogether. All right, the only time that actually cancels or does anything is right here on this fraction. So you get 3b plus 2. So notice that the 2 is still left there. Minus 6b equals 3. And then I'm just rearranging. So the first thing I've done here is I've combined my like terms by adding them. So I get -3b. And then I've skipped a step that I haven't shown here, and that's I'm moving this positive 2 to the other side. So what I'm doing then is subtracting 2 from both sides. All right, that's how I'm getting 1. And then b is almost by itself, but to finish this problem out, I need to divide by -3. So notice I'm dividing by the same sign, because I need to divide the whole -3 to go away. And -1 does not divide by 3, so my answer then is just b equals -1/3. All right, that's the same as 1 over -3, or -1/3. So any way that any kind of combination you write there will be counted as correct. All right, on this back page, the only expression that we have right here is actually question 24. So remember, expressions, we're not solving, no opposite operations, we're just trying to simplify what we've got. So I'm going to distribute the -4, that's what I've done there. And then all I did was combine or add the terms that I had that were similar. So 2a and -4a, I can combine those to get -2a minus 40. All right, so if I go back, let's just start working some of these equations, and I'm just going to kind of go in order and go over the ones that you all might need help with. So question 17 here. This is very much like that fraction question on the last page. I'm trying to get rid of the denominator. I had good questions today. You all were asking me about this -8. So to do that, I need to multiply by -8 because the denominator is negative. Otherwise, it's not going to cancel the negative out, which is not what we need. So those canceled. And then you can see what I got there. And then the only step I had left to do was to actually go back and add 80 to both sides to get rid of that. -80. So then I was left with x equals -8. All right, question 18, no fractions. Excited for that. We have to distribute first, so that's what I've done there. Distributed on both sides, -3 and the 6. And then I'm skipping a lot of steps, so let me just kind of talk through that for a minute. The first thing that I would do if I were you is maybe to combine some of these terms. So if I come over here to the left, I'm going to get -13x minus 12 equals 6x minus 12. So the first thing I wanted to do was combine the x's, and I like to always move any negative x variables just because I want to have positive coefficients. So I'm going to add 13x to both sides. And then I'll have -12 equals 19x minus 12. And then what I noticed, and you may have already noticed this, is that these -12s cancel out. If you don't notice it, you can still add 12 to both sides, but that's where I'm getting this 0 equals 19x. And the only step that's left then is going to be to divide by 19, so the x is by itself, so x equals 0. Remember, when you get this, even if you had gotten to the point that said -13x equals 6x, if there is an x, it cannot be no solution. So it's going to have to be something. So just remember that you may need to keep working to solve. All right, question 19 here. Again, fractions, we need to get rid of those, so I'm going to multiply by the denominator. I tried to explain this in class, but remember, this is one big fraction. So the denominators cancel, which means r plus 3 is left. You can't multiply like each part of the top. It would mean you're multiplying the fraction twice by the same thing. So we're going to get r plus 3 equals -6, and then subtract our 3 to get r equals -9. Question 20, fractions again. Notice I've got 4 pieces now, so I'm going to multiply by 7 every single piece. And hopefully you see on this problem right now I've made a mistake. I get 7a, my 7's cancel there to get 24, -14. The problem, hopefully you see it, the problem right here is that these 7's actually also cancel, right? Which means instead of 77, that's wrong, I should be writing here that I'm left with 11. All right, so let's see if we can fix that problem, fix our work there. So when I fix that, it's now going to say, well, you can see what that reads. We need to put our a's or our variables together, so I get -7a. So -7a plus 24 equals 11. So let's just rework this. And then I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides. -7a equals, what is this, -13. And then I'm going to divide by -7. And now, because I have negative over negative, it should be that a equals +13/7. All right. If you notice I've done another mistake on that, just let me know and we'll fix that tomorrow in class together before your test. All right, question 21. We should be getting close to the end now. Notice that when you try to combine the -6x and 6x, they give you 0. So this reads -5 equals 0. X's have gone away, so that means this is going to be no solution because -5 does not actually equal 0. Question 22. I distributed first, distributed my 5 to get 25x minus 40. I'm doing 2 things at once, so I'm going to add 5x to both sides. That's where the 30x comes from. And then in the next step, I added 40 to both sides and got 60. My last step here would have been to divide both sides by 30. And then 60 divided by 30 is going to be 2, so x equals 2. 23, last problem that we're going to work out right here. Distribute the negative 5. Notice that negative times negative gives you positive 5a. You may notice right away that those are the same thing on both sides, but if you don't, you might add 10 to both sides or subtract 5a from both sides. You may get to a part that says either negative 10 equals negative 10, or you might get something that says 0 equals 0. Either way, those are both true statements. And remember, instead of writing true, we need to write all real numbers. So just keep that in mind. Tomorrow, I don't want to see true on your test. I want it to say all real numbers. We already went over 24. 25, what's the difference between equation and expression? You all already know that. An equation has an equal sign and you can solve it. Equation's also one that you're going to use opposites on, right, to eliminate things. Expressions you can only simplify, so we can't solve and say that x equals anything, and here is where you're going to be adding terms together, adding like terms. So no opposites if you don't have an equal sign. 26, examples of when you get no solution in all real numbers. We talked about this in class today, but just remember no solution is something that's not true, and we don't need any variables. So an example would be like 2 equals 8, or 3 equals negative 3. That's not true. All real numbers would be something like 5 equals 5, or 17 equals 17, right? Those are both true statements, so that would give you all real numbers. And our last question down here at the bottom is really just to compare the differences between these two. And you will have a question like this on your test tomorrow. So anytime that you have an x, you have to be able to get an answer, right? Those are not, you should end up with like x equals something. So in the first one, we just divided by 2 to get x equals negative 1. In the second one, we divide by 2. 0 divided by 2 is 0. In the last one, we got kind of it's a little tricky. We need to get our x's together so that we can divide. So if I add 2x to both sides, I'm going to get 4x equals 0, right, if I add this 2 to the other side. So now if I divide by 4, I get x is 0, all right? These other examples that they give you here are no solution in all real numbers, and the reason is because there are no x values left. So negative 2 does equal negative 2, which is why I get all real numbers. That's true. But 2 does not equal negative 2. That's false, so that's why I'm going to say no solution there. All right, so make sure that you studied this. Make sure you finished all your problems for tomorrow to turn in your assignments. And then if you have any questions that I have not talked about here, you really do need to make sure you're coming to tutoring in the morning, because I may not have enough time to explain stuff before your test happens. And I want to make sure that you are as prepared as possible. So if you need help, come to tutoring at 8 tomorrow morning.